All right, welcome to the 208. Our world is more connected than it's ever been. Anything you want to know, it's right there on your fingertips, right, on the internet. But in the real world, the physical space around us, there's still some work that needs to be done for everything to be as connected as we want it to be. It's not hard to see how, on a map, how isolated the Treasure Valley is compared to other metro areas. I mean, the closest big city is 5 hours away. There's been talk about bringing back passenger trains to help bridge that connection to places like Salt Lake City. And with some federal funds, an Amtrak through Boise could soon be a reality. Again, here's Andrew Bartline.
I know you're here to talk about a big railroad.
You'd be hard-pressed to find a room with the governor where community members agree on the topic across the board.
I don't think there's been an issue in my 14 years that I've heard more agreement on than this one.
The business at hand is to discuss how the Treasure Valley can leverage federal dollars to fund a functional passenger train system.
It's a huge deal. I didn't realize it until I was mayor.
Caldwell Mayor Jerem Wagner learned quickly, because today he's a panelist tasked with explaining why passenger trains are crucial for his city.
It opens up all kinds of doors, and all the businesses downtown that would reap the benefit of people coming in from out of state to just come and visit Caldwell. Like I said, if even it's just for a few days, come and stay at our new hotel, go check out our restaurants, check out the downtown, then you get on the train and you go home. It's a great visit. They left their money here, which is awesome, and then they're gonna go home and tell their friends about the great time they had, and then we're gonna have more people coming after them.
Amtrak hasn't served the Treasure Valley since 1997. That's the last time a passenger train line connected the Boise metro area to Portland and Salt Lake City. But soon,
This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
the trains could come rolling back to town.
There's funding that Congress has approved that's out there, and there's going to be competition for it.
The Bipartisan Infrastructure Act set aside $66 billion for trains. And this is how Treasure Valley leaders planned to take in their share.
Working together from Caldwell to Nampa to Boise, even out to Mountain Home, that we are all on that same page, working together. We have the common goal, and we're working together to get there. So we're pulling in the same direction rather than pulling apart.
It takes cars off the road, it eases congestion, it does all those things to help the healthy conduct of commerce, and that's what we're all about.
Bill Connors is the Boise Chamber of Commerce president. He says Idaho cities along the proposed route have signed on to the idea. Collectively, they're working on an application for the federal government to conduct a study.
The idea is to get real numbers that are actionable, so you can take the next step and develop a real plan.
This study is funded entirely by the federal government, and depending on its findings, the feds will also pay for 80% of needed rail improvements, along with 90% of the first year's operation costs.
For us to be able to leverage that and take advantage of that, bring some of that money in to help, because yeah, we never could afford it. Even if we spent the entire city budget, we wouldn't get close to it.
But this is just the first step of what's likely to be years of work.
It's going to take a few years, but I believe we've knocked a few years off just because of the talk we've already had as cities, working together.
So this is sort of a multi-pronged situation going forward. Where we are right now, it's just the application phase, as they talked about. These cities are working together and their chambers of commerce are working together, and how the area wants to submit their application in total, and that's due on March. So Brian, when this application comes together, I believe the exact date is March 20th, the federal government reviews it. They will designate $500,000 to conduct a study of how many people are going to use this. Is this something that is necessary? Is it needed? And it seems like, perhaps, as we talked with the Amtrak guy today, that this is an area that continues to grow, Salt Lake as well. So there's high interest in this area. Based on that study, they have a plan of what exactly needs to be implemented, what needs to be changed going forward to make it a reality. So that's kind of how it works. Application, study, what needs to be done, and then you do it. And it looks like they're starting this process right now and the steps are in place.
Well, I mean, if you could take a high-speed train to Salt Lake City and not have to worry about driving those 5 hours, that'd be great. I mean, a lot of people I know would love to jump at that chance. Again, it's a matter of how many, though. Those who say they would versus those who actually would.
Yeah, so it's a big step to try to connect the area.
All right, thanks, Andrew. We'll keep tabs on that as well. All right, education stakeholders in Idaho. Got a lot to dig into this legislative session, but the emphasis on education and funding from Governor Little and lawmakers, something most see as a positive thing. So that's one thing on the good side. But there's one area where advocates want your attention drawn: childcare and the costs that come with it. A report from Idaho First Steps Alliance indicates if lawmakers do not act on some funding mechanisms soon, child care operations across Idaho could be in jeopardy. If even some of those businesses fail, though, you will know there's going to be fewer options out there for Idahoans who need and depend on child care. Thus, the call out to lawmakers. Here's Joe Paris.
A new report from the Idaho First Steps Alliance is drawing attention to child care costs in the Gem State. Advocates warn that if grant programs run by the Department of Health and Welfare expire at the end of the fiscal year, June of this calendar year, child care businesses across Idaho could be forced into untenable situations.
The pandemic hit the child care industry really hard, and they are really struggling to recover. There have been a few measures that have kept doors open over these last 3 years, but we have to continue to keep those going so that working families have access to child care. Because as we all know, if you have small children, child care is part of your village. You have to have child care in order for your life to function.
Emily Allen is a policy associate for Idaho Voices for Children. She explains, if lawmakers do not renew remaining relief funding requested by Health and Welfare, child care businesses will suffer massively.
And we've seen that these are businesses that are tough to keep afloat because of wages and really available resources to child care in the state.
That's exactly right. It's a super fragile revenue stream. And during the pandemic, when there were closures, mandated closures and things like that, we saw child care providers lose their revenue, just kind of fall out from under them. At the same time, parents are really not able to pay much more at this point. Child care costs are very high. In many counties across the state, child care for 2 kids exceeds what you would pay for housing. And we know that housing affordability across the state of Idaho is a big issue.
I've also read that some families spend more on child care than they would on in-state college tuition.
That's exactly right. Yeah, you could be, at the beginning of your career, you're starting out your family and you're paying just as much as parents who are sending their kids off 20 years later to an in-state institution.
With that said, Allen says their research found that nearly 8 out of 10 child care business owners in Idaho have used the grant programs to keep their doors open since the early months of the pandemic. In fact, 9 counties across Idaho saw every provider receive grant funding.
So with the ARPA funds, the Department of Health and Welfare was able to get some money into the pockets of child care providers, help pay some wages, help pay for some business expenses. Sounds like that could expire this year.
It will expire this year unless legislators take action. So the spending authority is only extended from the Idaho legislature to June 30th, 2023, which is the end of this fiscal year, unless they take action this session to continue those really important grants that have kept doors open.
If those grants aren't renewed, I guess what happens?
Walkouts. Right? Closures, more closures. Child care providers are very concerned that they're going to lose staff. They're not going to be, they've been very open with their staff that they're not going to be able to continue those wage enhancement grants on their own. And so they're very concerned that they'll be unable to continue providing resources to their community.
A focus of Governor Brad Little's State of the State address centers on funding education in Idaho. An encouraging step, but that budget still needs legislative approval.
Governor Little, in his budget, says that he has $15 million for child care infrastructure. It doesn't seem like there's a specific detail right now. What does that amount mean to you? Is this $15 million towards infrastructure? I mean, I imagine it's a good thing.
It's a great thing. Yeah, it's additional funding for a program that was stood up last year under the Workforce Development Council that was for the Child Care Expansion Program, and it addresses this shortage issue. It starts to chip away at this lack of availability, and it's really important dollars that the child care industry needs to continue moving forward.
But is it enough to really fix the problem?
15 million on top of another 15 million from last year is a meaningful amount of money that we are very grateful to see on the table, for sure. Yes.
But still, the Department of Health and Welfare grants, I mean, does seem to be a major factor still?
Yeah, they're part and parcel, right? Because we want to stabilize the existing availability. We cannot risk losing more child care providers. We need to keep those open. But we also have to have another eye on expanding availability and lifting up new providers who want to come in and start a business in the state of Idaho, or existing businesses who have really strong reputations and want to expand seats and dip into finally provide services to their long wait lists. And so it's a twofold solution to this ongoing problem.
In the early days of the legislative session, it seems that lawmakers are pretty receptive to funding childhood education as well as education in general. And that's really what we're talking about when the budgets are being discussed in the early going. And Brian, I know some of our viewers at home, we start talking about budgets, their eyes glaze over, they say it's boring stuff. But as the Joint Finance and Appropriation Committee starts to meet and they start to work on budgets, these are the type of implications that the boring stuff really has. The line items, the very specific programs, the funding, what's available to Idahoans. So it'll be very interesting to follow follow this story, and that's kind of what we're doing here today, Brian. We're kind of setting up this conversation for the legislative session. Of course, our team here has been following child care problems in Idaho for the last few years. It'll be interesting to see where this one goes.
I mean, if there's a surplus, I know a lot of people saying you can put the surplus toward this. I mean, that seems like an obvious where money is needed because, I mean, you don't want to skimp on who you pay to watch your children, right?
Yeah.
That's the biggest key of this is what you pay anybody to watch your kids.
At the same time, though, there's only so much to go around. You have roads you need to invest in. You have public education you need to invest in. The truth of the matter here is that something always loses out. What will it be? That's why you have to keep a close eye on the budgets.
All right, yep, that's just getting going there at the State House. Thank you very much, Joe. And a lot of other things happening at the State House. You know, have you ever been in those awkward company meetings where you welcome in new employees into your department and you go around the room and everyone either stands up or sits there and just introduces themselves? You say who you are, what you do, how long you've been there, maybe with the company, and maybe you add in a fun tidbit about yourself. And usually by the end of the Kumbaya meeting, the new people are so overwhelmed with new names, new job titles, they rarely remember what they just heard anyway, which is kind of what was happening in the Idaho legislature, committee meetings this week. A kind of welcome, an introduction, and get to know who's in the room kind of thing. On Tuesday, it was the House Agricultural Affairs Committee's first get-together, an after-lunch 8-minute affair. So they go around the room, beginning with Chair Representative Kevin Andrus, who was raised and still works on a ranch outside Pocatello. He said he loves Idaho agriculture and is excited to be here. Kind of that stuff, right? It then came time for the first-term representative from Jerome. And believe me, a lot of people remembered what he said in his introduction.
Jack Nelson, District 26. I'm a lifelong dairy farmer, retired, still own part of a dairy. Grew up on the farm. I've milked a few cows, spent most of my time walking behind lines of cows. So if you want some ideas on repro and the women's health thing, I have some definite opinions.
I've milked a few cows, spent most of my time walking behind lines of cows. So if you want some ideas on repro and the women's health thing, he said. Well, as I said, this was just an 8-minute introductory meeting. They kind of just said their things and left. And it's really something nobody really watches or pays much attention to. But when something like this gets said, you can imagine the traction it got on social media. Well, today, Representative Nelson is a man with a hat in his hand. He was very apologetic when he offered this statement as an explanation for his poor choice of words and an obvious poorly chosen analogy. The women in my life have taught me strength, resilience, integrity, hard work, joy, and love. I absolutely respect women and the right to choose their own health care. The way I phrased my statement about women and reproductive rights yesterday missed the mark and offended others in the process. I'm sorry. I recognize the mistake and commit to doing better in the future. I've always operated and will continue to operate under the standard that government does not belong in the doctor's office. So that's quite the opposite of what was interpreted at first as a man who thought of women as animals and their reproductive health should be treated accordingly. So not really what he was saying there. Representative Nelson spoke to me on the phone today, but didn't want to go on camera because he said while he regrets his choice of words, he also regrets the attention being taken away from the issues they need to address as legislators, and he didn't want to add to that. He said they have a lot to do this session, and offending people, he said, is certainly not one of them. Representative Nelson sits on 2 other committees, by the way, Education and Resources and Conservation. So just as a friendly reminder, at those introductory meetings, just stick with, I'm just happy to be here. It's about pushing the boundaries, literally. Greater Idaho is getting greater support. Now there's talks in Oregon's legislature to do just that, to even talk with Idaho leaders about moving parts of the Oregon-Idaho border further west. All right, you got a question or even a comment? Maybe you're concerned about something. Text them to us. You know the number, 208-321-5614. Just don't forget to include your name and the hashtag the 208, as usual. And also, as usual, stick around, because we could share yours at the end of the show.
People in Eastern Oregon like this idea, and they see it as a long-term solution that they've been waiting for a long time.
Well, that long-term, long-awaited solution is known as Greater Idaho. It's a concept we've been following the last few years here on the 208. The idea of 63% of Eastern Oregon becoming part of Idaho. So what the organizers of the Greater Idaho movement have done is ask counties to ask their people if, well, they want to join Idaho. These initiatives are just directives to their elected leaders. And the way they're worded on the ballot is basically, do you want your elected leaders to meet to discuss moving the border with Idaho? And so far, 11 counties have voted in favor of those discussions. And just yesterday, the Wallowa County clerk let them know they gathered enough signatures to put the initiative on the ballot in May of 2023. And there was even a memorial introduced in the Oregon legislature this week with a whole lot of, whereases and stuff like that. Like whereas Eastern Oregonians have begun to see Oregon government as a threat to their livelihoods, liberties, and values as their communities, as the preferences of their voters of Northwestern Oregon appear at odds with the livelihoods and values of Eastern Oregon communities. And whereas this legislative assembly considers the geographic content, or extent, I should say, of the state's jurisdiction to be a secondary consideration, whereas the Eastern Oregon map proposed by citizens for Greater Idaho would put only 9% of the population of Oregon under Idaho's jurisdiction. Anyway, it went on and on and on. But anyway, it resolved that we, the members of the 82nd Legislative Assembly, stand ready to begin discussions regarding the potential to relocate the Oregon-Idaho border. And we invite the Idaho legislature, the governor of Idaho and the governor of Oregon to begin talks on this topic with the Legislative Assembly in Oregon. Idaho Representative Barbara Ehart was supposed to offer up a similar resolution last legislative session here in Idaho. But, well, since they didn't have anything on the Oregon side last year, she held off. So expected to come up this session. Question is, why do so many Eastern Oregonians want to do this? According to the movement organizers, borders were meant to be changed when they no longer make sense, and the current Idaho-Oregon border doesn't make sense to them.
The cultural boundary between Oregon and Idaho is really the Cascade Mountain Range. It's not the Snake River. People in Eastern Oregon are very similar culturally, politically, economically to the people in Idaho, and it makes way more sense for them to get their governance from Idaho.
Do you feel like you guys are getting momentum?
Definitely. We are definitely getting momentum. This is the next step. We've averaged over our last 9, I think it's in our last 9 elections in Eastern Oregon, we've won with an average of like 61%. People are voting yes in big numbers. So the next step is to actually get the 2 state legislatures, who are the decision makers and the people that actually have the ability to make this happen, is to get those 2 bodies talking. So this is the next step for us. It's a huge step to get legislators in Oregon ready to pick this up and advocate for their voters.
We've been asked this several times every time we cover this. Why don't those people in Eastern Oregon just move to Idaho? Well, that would mean we could see 400,000 people just drop into Idaho, and a lot of them have family ranches and land they've owned for generations. They don't exactly want to walk away from those things. Okay, so they have 11 counties on board, like you saw with that map, that want to break the border, and with hopes to get 4 more and parts of 2 others involved. McCall told me if everything went according to plan without any hiccups, and the 2 state legislatures can figure out assets and debt obligations, they can grandfather in things like business licenses, stuff like that, hearings go smoothly, and they send it back to a vote of the people. And if all of that can happen, and they can get Congress to sign off on it, get this, that border could move, and Idaho could have an additional 62,000 square miles added to it by 2024. And Oregon will be, well, I guess, Oregon.
This view from Bogus Basin kind of tells the story of two different seasons today. You can see we've got the snow up in the higher elevations, and down in the valleys, temperatures are near 50 degrees, which makes it feel a little bit more like spring, right? We've got the winds that are blowing. We're talking about light moisture. Certainly has a springtime feel, even though we are definitely still firmly in the winter season. But you wouldn't know it just by looking at the temperatures, because right now our high was 52 earlier today, and right now temperatures are near 50 in western Treasure Valley spots, though it is definitely colder over in the Magic Valley area, 34 degrees right now in Jerome. So certainly still feeling like winter over there. Also, they have some wind speeds that are picking up at 22 miles an hour, so definitely feeling a little bit more wintry in Jerome, though definitely mild in other spots across southern Idaho today. We are expecting more moisture, but just not today. We have lots that's still streaming in from the Pacific, but you can see this stream of moisture doesn't exactly line up with where we are. And I actually had my brother ask me a question. Why isn't this moisture making it to our area? Well, it's because a lot of this, as it's coming in from the coast, think of all this moisture in the atmosphere kind of like a wet dish towel, right? You continue to wring it out as it moves inland. So by the time it's making it to us, a lot of that moisture has already been wrung out of the atmosphere, which is why we've been continuing to talk about light moisture accumulations both in the mountains and in the valleys. So that's what we'll continue to see as we go into the early part of the weekend. And then we start to see more moisture as we go into the later part of next week. And then we see snow start to work its way back in for the valleys.
All right, let's wrap up this Thursday with a look at your comments. Sheila sent in this question. Would the federal grant the legislature decided to reject have helped with child care issues? That's a good question, but I'm going to think that not. I mean, I guess communities could have used it as they saw fit, but for the most part, is for educational packets to take home for parents to help their kids learn at home, or even some of the communities that do have childcare to help them kind of further along a young child's education. So I don't know if it would actually pay for childcare. It's a good question, though, and it doesn't look like it would. How about the train coming back to this Treasure Valley, possibility of Amtrak travel? A train to IKEA? I'm in, says Kathy in Boise. And yeah, I see we're still trying to get on board. Carol says she found this from 1997, the last time Amtrak was in town. Got on board a commemorative ticket for a Treasure Valley commuter rail demonstration. The Sprinter, get on board. Boise, Meridian, and Nampa. Obviously, it didn't stick. Not enough people still had or used those tickets. As someone who has lived in Boise for 43 years, I agree with the statement that Eastern Oregon's culture is a match for Idaho. Don't agree. Yes, I'm much more aligned with Western Oregon. What's wrong with a diversity of culture anyway, asked Jack in Boise. That's a good question. And a lot of people are saying, why can't just that section of Oregon just create their own state? Well, it's only got 400,000 people in there. That would make them the smallest state in the union. Fewer than, what is it, Wyoming? Montana? I think Montana has the fewest population right now, or lowest population, I should say. Not sure that would be a possibility, but we'll see if this one is. Who knows? We'll see you tomorrow.